Live from Dallas, Texas, I'm Adrian Manns at the Money Show. Today I am speaking with James Altucher. We are going to talk about the economy, about where you think things are going, about what you think's happening right now. Where does an investor put his money?
That's a great question because I think there's so much uncertainty out there, and at the same time, all the economic data has been very consistent. Like we just, in the past day, announced a record low unemployment rate, 3.5% unemployment, the lowest since I think 1969. GDP going up, personal wages going up, consumer spending going up. Doesn't really seem like there's any hiccups in the economy, and yet everyone's scared.
Right.
And why do you think everyone's scared? What do you see?
I think there's a bunch of geopolitical risk that people sense, but they're not really certain of. They don't really know what it is, maybe. And then
that's because there's always geopolitical risk.
Right. But it's in your face right now, though.
Yeah, it's in your face because I think the newspapers are worried about making money, and they need to generate fear from someplace.
Yeah.
I was once on the back. I was once watching a news show from the side of the producer. And the producer comes up to me and says, "We're just trying to take up time in between ads." And so they just sort of put fear and greed, mostly fear, as much as possible into the news show, just to kind of get people riled up. But the reality is, things are pretty smooth. Now, the question is what happens when there's overwhelming automation across the economy. People lose their jobs as a result of that, and that's a question. But that starts to answer your question. Where should people put their money? Look for industries that are potentially going to change the economy. Industries like automation, 3D printing, AI, genomics. Genomics right now is doubling the cost of sequencing the human genome is getting cut in half every single year. Used to be $1 billion, now it's less than $100. You can sequence the whole genome. And so what that means is we can figure out what diseases can be cured from altering your genetics, and all of healthcare is going to change within the next 5 to 10 years. Automation. Right now we have the technology. Cars are already self-driving. They've driven millions of hours on highways. And so state by state, we're going to legalize automated driving. The number of cars on the road is going to go from 260 million cars to probably 100 million cars. So that's going to be a powerful place to invest. Not necessarily the Teslas of the world, but look for the companies that make the chips, make the technologies behind it. 3D printing. In China, they're already 3D printing buildings. They're going to start 3D, related to genomics, they're going to start 3D printing genes, that you could then inject into you for vaccines or whatever. So there's all sorts of interesting things happening in technology. I look for the industries that are doubling every year consistently, and whether the economy goes up or down, the science is going to continue doubling. You look at like computer science, Gordon Moore, the CEO at the time of Intel, one of the co-founders of Intel, he predicted computer power would double every 2 years in 1966. Moore's Law is 53 years later, Moore's Law is still true. It went from being a $50 million industry to a $10 trillion industry. So the same thing's happening with lots of industries now, whether it's solar power, genomics, AI, big data, automation, even cannabis. Only 10 states are legal for recreational marijuana. That's going to be 50 states. It's going to be all the countries in the world. So all the biggest, REITs, producers, even medical use companies of marijuana, those are going to continue to grow. And part of the question is which companies, but that's a longer story. But I would say all you've got to do is avoid the scams and invest in the rest, and you'll do really well. Of course, there's lots of scams.
Yeah, and that's the issue, right? Is that the 24-hour news cycle is only interested in the scam or the Tesla crash or the bad news, right? Because there's no money to be made selling advertising when the news is good. Nobody's watching it. People want to hear about the last tweet. People want to hear about the last thing that went wrong somewhere. So where do you tell an investor to go look and keep up with the technology? Because I remember we used to read, dozens of PC-oriented magazines when I was in college. You always sort of knew what the newest technology was. You don't see this stuff even on the shelves anymore, right?
Well, you don't see it on the investment shelves, but you can read it about genomics. There's a good popular science book came out recently called Hacking Darwin by Jamie Metzl. He did a lot of research and kind of produced a, where are we now and where are we heading in the field of genomics. There's lots of books on AI and automation. look, wherever you are politically, and I'm all over the place, but the Andrew Yang's book, the War on Normal People, talks about automation and has a lot of good statistics. So there's lots of books out there kind of explaining what's happening. Matt Ridley's book, The Evolution of Everything, and The Rational Optimist also talks about how, in general, things are always getting better, but people sort of always feel like things are getting worse. And who knows why that is? This could be our natural inclination to worry. It could be the media. But in general, it's healthy to remember that on most major metrics, the world's getting better. Like, you look at this tariff war with China.
Right.
The reality is, people are comparing it to the tariff war that happened in 1929 with the Smoot-Hawley tariff that basically created the Great Depression. But the reality is, the whole issue with tariffs in China, our actual exports have been going up, since this tariff war started, as opposed to 1929 when it went 70% down and then the Great Depression started. Interest rates are, zero essentially. You kind of need a 6% interest rate or higher to create this sort of malaise that will have a stock market crash. There's nothing happening right now. There's nothing that I'm necessarily super afraid of. There's small things that I'm afraid of. Like you mentioned, there's kind of this feeling of uncertainty. So I'm afraid of that. I'm also afraid about the rise in ETFs. You probably see this in your own business, the systemic potential for ETFs to start unraveling. That's kind of the one thing that's a very scary potential in the market, but it's neither here nor there. Like, it's unpredictable and may never happen. But the reality is, I look for small stocks, small companies that participate in industries that are exponentially growing, and also, if I were investors, I would look at crowdfunding sites like Republic, where they can get in on companies earlier. You don't want to wait for the next Uber to be worth $100 billion. You can potentially invest in private companies now.
Again, you just have to be a very educated consumer when you're going to the crowdfunding sites.
Yes.
Right?
So what I do is, because I don't consider myself that educated across every industry, is I look for companies that already have very sophisticated investors invested in them. Even public companies. If Warren Buffett's invested in a company, I'm not going to argue. If I run into him at a cocktail party, I'm not going to say, "Warren, how could you have invested in XYZ company? You're so stupid." No, I'll just write a check and invest in the company too.
All right, and I'm going to claim ignorance and say I have not read your book. Tell me what I'm going to learn if I read your book.
Great. So Choose Yourself is one of my books. I have a bunch of books, but Choose Yourself is a book about how the economy's changing. You can no longer depend on getting the safe and steady college education, then start at a job, then rise up for 50 years and then retire. You kind of have to choose your sources of income. Find out what you love, learn more and more skills, and then start, there's a lot of techniques for improving your creativity, and then figure out how to get multiple streams of income doing what you love. And it sounds kind of cliche when I say it that way, but I really go through my own example of how to do it, and I failed lots of times, and sometimes it works out, and when it works out, it feels really good, and you make money.
Yeah, fantastic. All right, James Altucher, thank you.
Thanks, Adrian.
Very nice having you. I'm Adrian Manns, live from Dallas, Texas for The Money Show.